The massive Zyx'kara warship descended through Earth's atmosphere with all the grace of a drunken space whale. Not that anyone would dare mention this to the proud warrior race. They were quite sensitive about their piloting skills, among other things. Commander Zyx'kara stood at attention, his forearms crossed in what he assumed was an intimidating pose. At 9 feet tall, with iridescent scales and retractable claws, he'd spent his entire military career striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. That was until he'd heard about the humans. "Approaching human military installation," announced Navigator Patok, her antenna twitching nervously. "Should we activate our shield generators?" Zyx'kara let out a rumbling laugh. "For what? These humans are barely Category 3 on the galactic threat scale. Their gravity alone should make them weak and slow." The delegation of 20 Zyx'kara warriors shifted uncomfortably in their ceremonial armor. They'd all heard the stories, how humans had single-handedly fought off the Drachnid invasion, how they'd survived first contact with the Hive Mind Collective without becoming drones, but surely those were exaggerations. As they landed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Zyx'kara's first impression was disappointment. The welcoming committee consisted of 5 humans in what appeared to be cloth coverings, uniforms, according to his translator. Leading them was a broad-shouldered human male who introduced himself as General Marcus Thompson. "Welcome to Earth," Thompson said, extending a hand in greeting. Zyx'kara stared at the appendage, wondering if this was some kind of primitive combat challenge. "You're supposed to shake it," whispered his cultural advisor, looking mortified. The handshake that followed would go down in human-alien diplomatic history as the Great Awkward Moment of 2157. 4 arms versus 2 created quite the choreographic challenge. "We've prepared a briefing on our military capabilities," Thompson continued, leading them toward a large building. "Though I understand you're primarily interested in our training methods?" Zyx'kara nodded his massive head. "Yes, we've analyzed your species' combat effectiveness, but cannot comprehend how you achieve such results with your limited physical form." Thompson's mouth twitched in what the aliens would later learn was a suppressed smile. "Limited, right." The briefing room was filled with human military officials of various ranks. Zyx'kara's delegation took up twice the space of their hosts, their ceremonial armor scraping against chairs designed for much smaller beings. "As you can see," a human colonel explained, pointing to various charts, "our basic training program takes civilians and transforms them into soldiers in just 10 weeks. The translator must be malfunctioning. Zyx'kara's scales rippled in disbelief. 10 weeks? That's impossible. Our warriors train for 10 cycles minimum." "How many Earth years is that?" Thompson asked innocently. "Approximately 30 of your years," Zyx'kara replied proudly. The humans exchanged glances that made the alien commander distinctly uncomfortable. He'd seen that look before, usually right before someone suggested he calmed his life insurance provider. "Perhaps," Thompson said carefully, "you'd like to observe a training cycle? See our methods firsthand?" Zyx'kara's second heart began beating faster with anticipation. Finally, they would uncover the humans' secret weapons or advanced biotechnology. That had to be how these fragile beings became such formidable warriors. "We accept," he declared. "When can we begin?" "Tomorrow morning, 0500 hours. "So late in the day?" Zyx'kara asked, confused. The Zyx'kara typically began their days at the equivalent of 0200 Earth hours. Thompson's smile grew wider. "Trust me, it'll feel plenty early. We'll start you off with something simple, just watching our morning PT session." As the delegation filed out, Zyx'kara overheard one human officer whisper to another, "Should we warn them about Drill Sergeant Rodriguez?" "Nah," came the reply, accompanied by a sound Zyx'kara would soon learn to recognize as suppressed laughter. "Let them experience the full human training experience." That night, aboard their ship, Zyx'kara addressed his warriors. "Remember, we are here to understand how these humans transform their young into effective fighters. Their physical capabilities are clearly inferior. No enhanced strength, no natural armor, no backup organs." His second-in-command, Warriors Master Katal, raised a clawed hand. "But sir, what about the reports from the Drachnid invasion? They say a single human lifted a crashed shuttle to save their squad mates." "Propaganda," Zyx'kara dismissed. "Tomorrow we'll see the truth. How difficult can their training be?" The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. It was saving its best punchline for tomorrow morning, when these proud alien warriors would learn exactly why humans had earned their reputation. And it had nothing to do with superior technology or secret weapons. It had everything to do with what humans called embrace the suck, a concept that would soon become intimately familiar to the Zyx'kara delegation, whether they wanted it to or not. Little did Commander Rixathor know, as he settled into his gravity-adjusted sleep pod, that he was about to witness something far more terrifying than any weapon of mass destruction, the human capacity for voluntary suffering in the name of improvement. And somewhere on the base, Drill Sergeant Rodriguez was reviewing the weather forecast for tomorrow, grinning as he saw the prediction for rain. At precisely 0430 hours, Commander Rixathor's delegation arrived at Fort Richardson, their scales already crackling from Alaska's brutal cold. The Zyx'kara warriors huddled together, their mighty frames shivering despite their advanced thermal regulation suits. "This is barbaric," muttered Katal, his teeth chattering. "Who would build a training facility in such an inhospitable location?" "Humans," answered Rixathor, as if that explained everything, and increasingly it did. Their escort led them to the barracks just as a short, muscular human emerged from the building. Despite being nearly half their size, Drill Sergeant Marcus Chen carried himself with the confidence of someone who could bench press a small planet. "Welcome to paradise," Chen announced, his voice carrying the warmth of a polar ice cap. "You're just in time for wake-up call." Before Rixathor could ask what a wake-up call entailed, Chen pulled out something small and metallic. The aliens leaned forward, curious about this mysterious human device. Was it some sort of advanced sonic weapon, a neural stimulator? It was a whistle. The sound that erupted from that tiny instrument sent all 20 aliens reeling backward, their sensitive auditory organs overwhelmed. Inside the barracks, chaos erupted. "Move it, move it, move it! You've got exactly 2 minutes to be in formation, and I already counted to 119. Rixathor watched in horror as young humans practically fell out of their beds, scrambling to dress themselves while simultaneously making their sleeping areas presentable. It was like watching a hive of worker insects after someone kicked their nest, except with more cursing. "Is this some form of torture?" Patok whispered, her antenna now completely flat against her head. "Negative," their cultural advisor responded, consulting his datapad. "According to their records, this is standard procedure." The recruits assembled outside in record time, standing at attention in the pre-dawn darkness. The temperature was well below freezing, and their breath created small clouds in the air. The aliens noticed something odd about their formation. "Why are some of them wearing minimal clothing?" Rixathor asked, pointing to several recruits in shorts and t-shirts. Chen's smile could have frozen nitrogen. "Those are the ones who weren't fast enough yesterday. They lost their cold weather gear privileges." The aliens exchanged horrified glances, losing protection against the elements as punishment. Surely this violated some galactic convention. "Now then," Chen announced, "let's start with a light warm-up. 5 miles, full gear, up Bulldog Hill." Katal's translator must have malfunctioned. "Excuse me, but did you say light warm-up?" "Of course," Chen replied. "We saved the real running for after breakfast." What followed was a demonstration that defied every alien conception of human limitations. The recruits, loaded down with equipment that looked heavy enough to crush their seemingly fragile frames, began running up a slope that appeared better suited for mountain goats. "The gravity," Rixathor muttered. "How are they moving so fast in this gravity?" Chen overheard him. "Oh, you think this is impressive? Wait until you see the obstacle course." The obstacle course, as it turned out, was designed by someone who clearly harbored deep-seated grudges against the concept of human survival. The aliens watched in mute horror as recruits crawled under razor wire, scaled walls, and swung across mud pits that seemed to have been imported directly from some primordial soup. "This can't be legal," Patok declared as one recruit face-planted into the mud, got up and continued running with a grin plastered across their dirt-covered face. "Look," Katal pointed frantically, "that one's bleeding." Indeed, one of the recruits had scraped their arm on the wall climb. Instead of seeking immediate medical attention, they simply wiped it on their uniform and kept going. "Just a flesh wound," Chen called out cheerfully. "Rub some dirt on it." The alien delegation's medical officer fainted. When they reached the rappelling tower, Rixathor finally found his voice. "You expect them to jump off this structure with just that thin rope?" Jump, Chen laughed. Nah, that's tomorrow. Today they're climbing up, then rappelling down 20 times. But why? Because I haven't had my coffee yet and misery loves company. The morning continued with what the humans called PT, physical training. The aliens watched in fascinated disgust as the recruits performed exercises with names that sounded like medieval torture techniques: burpees, mountain climbers, flutter kicks. The flutter kick was actually invented by Satan himself, Chen explained helpfully, as if that clarified anything. During a brief water break, Katal approached one of the recruits. Why do you submit yourself to this voluntary suffering? The recruit shrugged. Sir, honestly, this is nothing compared to what my older sister went through in Marine boot camp. She said they had to. That's enough, Private, Chen interrupted. We don't want to give our guests nightmares. Save the Marine stories for Halloween. By midday, the alien delegation had witnessed more acts of voluntary human endurance than they'd previously thought possible. They'd seen recruits carrying each other up hills in fireman carries, doing push-ups in the mud and chanting songs about their impending doom with disturbing enthusiasm. I think I understand now, Zyx'kara announced suddenly. Understand what? Chen asked. Why no one has successfully invaded Earth? You're all insane. Chen beamed with pride. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all day. Just wait until you see what we do for fun on weekends. The aliens didn't wait to hear about weekends. They were too busy drafting an urgent message to their high command, recommending an immediate and permanent alliance with humanity. Not because they were impressed, but because they were now convinced that any species that considered this basic training was clearly too terrifying to risk antagonizing. As they prepared to leave for their midday break, Chen called out, "Don't forget to come back for the afternoon session. That's when we introduce them to the gas chamber." The sound of 20 alien warriors trying to come up with diplomatic excuses to leave early was drowned out only by Chen's laughter and the rhythmic counting of recruits still doing push-ups in the background. Remember, Chen shouted after their retreating forms, tomorrow we're doing underwater knot tying in the frozen lake. The last thing the aliens heard as they fled was a recruit enthusiastically asking, "Will there be sharks this time, Drill Sergeant?" Chen's reply of maybe echoed in their nightmares for weeks to come. The next morning found Commander Zyx'kara and 5 of his bravest warriors standing in PT formation alongside the human recruits. After hours of heated debate and several questioning transmissions from High Command, they decided the only way to truly understand human training was to experience it firsthand. "Are you sure about this?" General Thompson asked, watching the aliens attempt to mimic the human stance. "No other species has ever volunteered to—" "We are elite Zyx'kara warriors," Zyx'kara declared proudly. "How difficult can human exercises be?" No, Drill Sergeant Chen's grin should have been their first warning. "Jumping jacks," Chen bellowed. "Begin!" The sight of 6 9-foot-tall aliens attempting jumping jacks with 4 arms would later become the most watched video in Earth's military history. Patok's arms tangled so badly, she spun in circles. Katal, trying to coordinate all his limbs, looked like a malfunctioning windmill. "I don't understand," Zyx'kara gasped after 30 seconds. "How do humans maintain this rhythm without auxiliary balance organs?" "Less talking, more jumping," Chen encouraged. "Only 297 more to go." The push-ups were even worse. The aliens' natural armor plating, while excellent against plasma weapons, proved less than ideal for exercise. Every time they lowered themselves, their scales caught on the ground. Down, up, Commander, your 4th arm is cheating." Zyx'kara, face down in the dirt, wondered if this was how great military careers ended. Not in glorious battle, but doing something called a push-up, while a human half his size critiqued his form. The running nearly broke them. Their heavyweight frames, perfect for intimidating lesser species, turned against them in Earth's gravity. The human recruits lapped them twice. "Come on, alien," a particularly cheerful recruit called out. "Pain is temporary. Pride is forever." "So is death," muttered Katal, wheezing. By the time they reached the obstacle course, the aliens had developed a profound respect for human physiology. Their own superior strength meant nothing when they couldn't fit through the tire run or untangle their limbs from the rope climb. "Watch Private Rodriguez," Chen suggested, pointing to a recruit smoothly navigating the course. "Notice how they use momentum instead of strength?" The aliens watched, fascinated, as humans turned their supposedly inferior bodies into advantages. They swung, rolled, and twisted through obstacles that the Zyx'kara found impossible. During water training, they discovered another horrifying human trait. The recruits were practicing underwater maneuvers in the freezing lake when one emerged, lips blue. "Are you dying?" Patok asked, concerned. "Nah," the recruit grinned, teeth chattering. "Just getting fresh motivation." "Motivation for what?" "For the warm shower I'll get in 3 hours if I survive." The aliens huddled together, discussing this new information. They deliberately make themselves uncomfortable to appreciate comfort more later. "That's some next-level psychological warfare," Katal observed. "They're fighting themselves." The afternoon brought more revelations. During hand-to-hand combat training, the aliens watched humans pick themselves up after being thrown, grinning and asking for more. "Humans have backup pain receptors," Zyx'kara asked the medical officer. "Negative, Commander. They're just ignoring them." A young recruit overheard them. "Like Drill Sergeant says, embrace the suck." "Embrace the suck." "Yeah, when something sucks, don't fight it. Accept it, embrace it, make it your friend. Then it can't break you." The aliens spent the next hour contemplating this philosophy, which seemed to contradict every survival instinct in the galaxy. The breaking point came during team exercises. The recruits had to carry heavy logs through a muddy course, working together despite exhaustion. The aliens watched in amazement as smaller humans compensated for their size by adjusting positions and encouraging their teammates. "That one there," Katal pointed. "She's clearly experiencing muscle failure. Why doesn't she stop?" "Because," Chen explained, "her buddy to the left would have to work harder, and nobody lets their battle buddy down." That's when it clicked for Zyx'kara. Humans weren't just training their bodies, they were forging connections, teaching themselves to override physical limitations through sheer willpower and loyalty. During the evening meal, the aliens sat with the recruits, their bodies aching in places they didn't know could ache. They listened as the humans joked about the day's torments, already planning for tomorrow's challenges. "Don't worry about the gas chamber," one recruit assured them. "The burning sensation only lasts a few hours." "Gas chamber?" Patok squeaked. "Oh yeah, it's great for the sinuses, really clears them out, along with your will to live." The recruits laughed. The aliens wondered if human humor was another form of psychological training. Before leaving that night, Zyx'kara approached Chen. "Drill Sergeant, I must know, how do you select which humans to train? Surely only your genetic elite could survive this." Chen chuckled. "These are regular civilians, Commander. Some of them were playing video games in their parents' basements 3 weeks ago." The implications hit Zyx'kara like a plasma blast. Any human could be transformed into this. Their entire species had this potential. "That's why you won the Drachnid War," he realized. "Not because you're stronger, but because we're really good at being uncomfortable," Chen finished, "and getting back up, and helping others get back up too." As the alien delegation limped back to their ship, they overheard 2 recruits talking. "Hey, what do you think they'll make us do tomorrow?" "Probably something awful, can't wait." Katal shuddered. "Commander, I suggest we update the human threat assessment." "Agreed. Category 3 was optimistic. Any species that voluntarily subjects itself to this and calls it basic training, and smiles about it, and asks for more." They both looked back at the barracks where the sound of cheerful cadence calling echoed into the night. "Perhaps," Zyx'kara suggested, "we should focus less on understanding them and more on staying on their good side." From the barracks, Chen's voice boomed, "Tomorrow's gonna be fun. We're doing stress positions in the rain." The enthusiastic cheers that followed haunted the aliens' dreams. The storm rolled in just as night fell, because of course it did. Commander Zyx'kara stood with his delegation under a makeshift shelter, watching lightning split the Alaskan sky. The weather warning systems on their ship were screaming about dangerous electrical activity. "Surely they'll postpone the exercise," Patok said hopefully. "No species conducts training in these conditions." Drill Sergeant Chen walked past, grinning like a man who'd just found out Christmas came early. "Perfect weather for our final test, wouldn't you say?" The aliens watched in disbelief as the recruits geared up, checking their equipment with practiced efficiency. Nobody complained about the rain. Nobody even mentioned it. "Listen up," Chen's voice carried over the thunder. "Tonight's exercise is simple. 12-mile ruck march through the mountain trail, full combat load. You'll face opposition forces, medical emergencies, and equipment failures. Work as a team, complete the mission, come back alive. That's their definition of simple, Katal whispered. Oh, and one more thing, Chen added. The enemy has intel suggesting some of you are injured or exhausted. They'll target the weakest links, so watch out for your battle buddies. The aliens observed as the recruits organized themselves. Stronger members automatically moved to support those who'd struggled during previous exercises. Someone started singing what they'd learned was called a Jodi call, and soon the whole group joined in. Through the downpour, voices rang out. When my granny was 91, she did PT just for fun. They're singing in this weather, before a death march, Zyx'kara noted incredulously. The exercise began and the aliens followed in their all-terrain vehicle, unwilling to miss this culmination of human insanity. Their thermal imaging showed the recruits' body temperatures remaining steady despite the cold rain, as if their determination generated actual heat. 3 hours in, disaster struck. A recruit slipped on the muddy trail, their ankle twisting with an audible pop. The aliens expected a medical evacuation. Instead, they watched as the recruit's teammates redistributed the injured person's gear among themselves, created a support system, and continued moving. Their efficiency decreases by helping the injured one, Katal observed. Tactically, they should leave them. That's not how humans work, Chen said suddenly beside their vehicle. Nobody gets left behind. Lightning illuminated the scene as the recruits encountered the opposition force. The aliens expected chaos. What they saw was coordination that would make veteran Zyx'kara units envious. Hand signals, tactical movements adapting to terrain and weather conditions, all executed while supporting their injured comrade. Watch closely, Chen advised. This is where it gets interesting. The opposition force had set up an ambush near a river crossing. The water had risen from the rain, making the passage treacherous. Normal species would retreat, find another route. The recruits formed a human chain. They're using their bodies as anchors, Zyx'kara realized, in near-freezing water. The cold makes you feel alive, shouted one recruit as they helped others across. That's hypothermia talking, another answered cheerfully. Halfway through the exercise, equipment started failing. Night vision devices shorted out in the rain. Communications gear malfunctioned. The recruits adapted instantly, falling back on basic training, using hand signals and sound discipline. They're not even surprised by the failures, Patok noted, as if they expected things to go wrong. They did, Chen confirmed. First rule of combat, everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Usually, all at once. The final phase of the test pushed human endurance beyond what the aliens thought possible. The recruits had been moving for hours, soaked to the bone, carrying heavy loads, supporting injured teammates. Yet when they spotted their objective, they didn't slow down, they accelerated. Lightning flashed again, illuminating a scene Zyx'kara would never forget. 20 humans, exhausted beyond reason, covered in mud, helping each other up a near-vertical slope. The injured recruit was now being carried across shoulders, the team refusing to slow their pace. I understand now, Zyx'kara said quietly. What's that, Commander? Chen asked. Why the drachnids failed, why the hive mind couldn't process humans. We've all been measuring the wrong things. Strength, speed, technology, none of that matters. Thunder crashed overhead. The recruits started singing again, something about blood upon the risers. What matters, Zyx'kara continued, is that humans don't break. You can exhaust them, freeze them, hurt them, and they help each other up and keep moving. How do you defeat an enemy that gets stronger through suffering? That's the neat part, Chen grinned. You don't. As if to punctuate his point, the recruits crested the final hill. They were walking taller now despite their exhaustion. One of them spotted the finish point and called out, "Last one that has to eat drill sergeant's cooking." They sprinted the final distance. Even the injured recruit hobbled faster. They're still making jokes, Katal marveled, after everything. Humor is a weapon, Chen explained, sometimes the only one you have left. The exercise ended as dawn broke through the clouds. The recruits stood in formation, muddy, tired, but undefeated. Not a single one had quit. What happens now? Patok asked. Chen's smile was almost gentle. Now they get 3 hours of sleep, then we start all over again. Because the only easy day was yesterday, the recruits shouted back. Commander Zyx'kara made a mental note to update the human threat assessment one final time. Category 3 wasn't just wrong, it wasn't even on the right scale. How do you categorize a species that turns torture into training, suffering into strength, and considers it all basic? 1 week later, the treaty signing ceremony took place in Washington, D.C. Commander Zyx'kara stood before the assembled dignitaries, his ceremonial armor polished to a shine. His muscles still ached from attempting human exercises. "Before we sign," he announced, "I'd like to revise the terms of our military alliance." The human delegates tensed. General Thompson raised an eyebrow. "We'd like to request fewer joint training exercises than originally planned." Scattered laughter filled the room. In the back, Drill Sergeant Chen wiped away a fake tear. "Additionally," Zyx'kara continued, "we propose that in any future conflicts, the Zyx'kara forces serve in support roles only. We'll provide the ships, the weapons, the technology. You humans just do what you do." "And what's that?" Thompson asked, fighting a smile. "Training for fun, running in storms, making jokes while suffering. The usual human activities that give the rest of the galaxy nightmares." The treaty was signed to thunderous applause. As the celebrations began, Katal approached a group of the recruits they'd watched train. "One question," he said. "What happens after basic training?" "Oh, that's when the real fun starts," a recruit grinned. "Wait until you hear about advanced individual training." The sound of multiple alien warriors rushing to update their reports to High Command was drowned out by human laughter. As they prepared to depart Earth, Zyx'kara had one final conversation with Chen. "You know," the drill sergeant said, "you aliens didn't do too badly at PT. We nearly died." "Exactly, that's the spirit. You're practically honorary humans now." Zyx'kara shuddered. "Please don't say that. Our insurance rates are high enough already." Looking back at Earth from orbit, Commander Zyx'kara dictated his final report. Human training methods classified as psychological warfare. Their basic training would qualify as enhanced interrogation on most worlds. They call this character building. Recommendation: maintain strongest possible alliance. If humans ever decide to conquer the galaxy, suggest immediate surrender. Resistance would just amuse them. Patok added a postscript. Also, they do this all without genetic enhancements or cybernetics, because, according to them, that would be cheating. May the cosmic forces help us all. As their ship entered hyperspace, Katal turned to his commander. "Sir, do you think we should tell High Command about their Marine Corps?" Zyx'kara thought about the stories they'd heard. "Let's not give the Council nightmares. Some things in this galaxy are better left unknown." Somewhere on Earth, Drill Sergeant Chen was already planning the next joint training exercise, humming happily as he designed new obstacles. After all, the galaxy needed to learn that humans weren't just any species. They were the species that invented burpees, and they were proud of it.